This happened only a month ago, and it doesn't really scare me anymore. It just constantly makes me think, what if I'm in college and I'm still living with my parents and older sister? It was spring break and my parents went on a road trip while my sister and I stayed home alone. 2 nights after my parents left town, I was at the house alone because my sister was out with her boyfriend. It was around 5 or 6 o'clock, and I decided to go work out because I was really bored and I could use it. I live less than half a mile from my hotel, so I use their gym because it's so close. I was going to jog there like I usually did, but I changed my mind right before I left because I didn't want to walk back home from the gym. I knew that I would be all tired if I did that, so I got my keys and decided to drive to the gym. I walked out of the front door, and I paused for a second because I got a random feeling to lock the front and back door. My mom is really paranoid about locking the doors and windows because she's scared that a crazy person will break in or hurt us, or worse, kill us. She always tells me to lock the door, but I rarely do, especially if I'm leaving the house for only a short period of time. But for some reason, I got a feeling to lock the doors, so I went back inside and locked the back door, and made sure to lock the front door as well when I left. I drove to the gym, and I was then there for about an hour and a half. Not long after I got there, I randomly got a really bad gut feeling that made my stomach twist and anxiety high. I also have paranoia about things like my mother, but it's different. For some weird reason, I blamed the bad gut feeling on my house catching on fire with no one able to save my dog because I had locked both doors. But it doesn't consume my thoughts or make me want to go home or anything. I finally leave, and I get back home in minutes. My house wasn't on fire, which I knew deep down that it wasn't anyways. So I get out of the car, and I walk to my front door, pulling out my keys to unlock it. But before I had even reached to unlock the door, I then paused because I saw a brown napkin-looking thing wrapped tightly around the door handle. My mind instantly went to the recent fentanyl poisonings, and there were cases of things like napkins and bills being smeared with fentanyl, causing people to overdose when they touched them. I didn't touch it. I called my parents because I started to get scared. I didn't really know what to do. My mother was understandably freaked out, and she told me not to touch it. I talked with my dad, and men being men, no hate, logic is appreciated here. He tried to be logical, and then tell me that someone must have put an ad on the door handle, and that another person must have ripped it off our door. I then FaceTimed them, and I showed them what it looked like. It clearly wasn't an ad. It looked like thick paper bag material. I also made sure to tell them that I was staring right at the door handle before I left for the gym, and there was absolutely nothing on the door handle before, meaning someone came up and wrapped it around the door handle while I was at the gym. I was pretty freaked out, but it was early dusk outside, so there was still a good amount of light around me, thankfully. My mom calmed me down, but my dad was still thinking we were overreacting. I unlocked the door, got my gloves from my dad's truck, and I took the brown napkin thing off the door handle, throwing it on the ground very fast. I kept the gloves on, opened the door, went inside, put the gloves in the washing machine, then wiped my front door handle with Clorox wipes. I then shut the door and locked it, not knowing what to do with the paper bag that was just lying on the porch. I say paper bag now, because as I looked at the bag on the ground through the window, I could clearly see that it was a small paper brown bag, and it was 100% not an ad someone puts on people's doors. It looked like the type of paper bag that holds sauces or silverware from a restaurant, and it was curled into a C shape from being wrapped around the handle so tightly. I kept watching outside my house through my windows, but I never saw anyone, or even a feeling of being watched. I calmed down completely, and I had waited for my sister and her boyfriend to come home. I called my own boyfriend and I told him all about it. He promised to leave me with Second Amendment protection for the rest of the time my parents were gone, because he was really creeped out that someone would come up and put a brown bag on our door, whether it had fentanyl or not. My sister came home and I told her and her boyfriend everything. They were freaked out too, also assuming that there was probably fentanyl on the bag. Them being there gave me courage, so I went back outside with gloves on, and I picked up the suspicious brown paper bag. I went back inside to show them. They both gathered around me, and then watched as I started to uncrumple the bag from its C shape. On the inside of the C shape, the part that was touching the door handle, there was a gooey clear liquid that had the consistency of runny snot smeared all across the inside of it. We all went silent, as our fentanyl fears were even greater. I quickly closed the bag, and then put it in the trash, taking off the gloves and putting those in the washing machine as well. That was the end of it though. Nothing new or weird since then. I really wish we had cameras or a ring so we have more information on who, how, and why. I would really like to know what you guys think it was. To anyone who hears this, do you think I'm overreacting? Do you think it really was fentanyl wrapped up in that tiny little napkin? Or do you think it was a sex trafficking tactic? I live near Houston, not too close, but a good distance. I know the sex trafficking is hot there. Or maybe it was someone who was just really high and just randomly chose our house to mess with and actually put snot on our door handle. But that's really not likely because we have police officers that stroll through the neighborhood and people don't just walk around high like that. It's a small neighborhood too, only 8 streets, and even without the police officers, this is a decent neighborhood with maybe a few. But most likely no drug users. It's really just a bunch of old people, so I don't know. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments, because I still really wonder about it a lot. My apartment was robbed once and then broken into a couple of months later, and that's not even the crazy or spooky part. I had just moved in and I got very, very sick, and I actually had to go stay with my parents while getting treatment at the hospital. No one had even been to my new place or moved the address. It was full of unpacked boxes that I was too ill to move in properly. Whoever broke in, they left the TV, they left a jar of cash on the dresser, and they only took my diaries. Multiple diaries, and I always buy the same kind, and they date back for years and years. Each of them were packed into different boxes, too. Someone had riffled through my stuff, found those diaries, and only took them. They'd even left my DIY recipe books, which were the same style as those diaries, so they had to have checked each individual one. This apartment was on the 3rd floor. There was no sign of a break-in, but there were small handles on the outside of the pillars of the porch that went all the way to the ground. Thinking maybe, perhaps they climbed, but I don't know. The second occurrence when I knew something weird was happening, and that someone had been in my apartment, I returned home one night to find the light outside of my door was off. In the moment, I didn't really think much of it, except that I needed to call and get it replaced. I unlocked and opened up my door and tried to turn on the light, nothing. I thought maybe the power had gone out, but then I looked and saw my microwave still had the correct time on it. Something about that spooked me, and I went over and called the on-call agent for our apartment complex. He came over, and I waited outside. He came out a few minutes later and told me to immediately call the police. Turns out nothing had been taken, but every single light bulb in my apartment had been unscrewed just enough so that the lights wouldn't turn on. The cops came and checked it out, found nothing suspicious, but told me to stay somewhere else for the night. The next day, after telling my sister what happened, her and a boyfriend drove from 3 hours away and installed deadbolts. It was against the complex policy, but the management was just as creeped out as I was. Thankfully, nothing else creepy happened in the 2 years that I lived there. My family and I used to live in a very rough neighborhood when I was a kid, around 7 years old. One night, it was just my mom, me, and my 2 siblings at home. My dad was on a business trip. Around midnight that night, someone began to knock on our door. My mom woke up, went to the front door, and asked who it was. No answer. She thought maybe it was some kids playing ding dong ditch or something, so she just casually didn't think much of it and went back to bed. About 30 minutes later, someone began to knock again. This time she got up and peered through the side window to see if she could catch anyone out there, but there was nobody there. She starts to worry, goes back to the room, grabs my dad's shotgun, and sits in the living room in the dark, just waiting. Sure enough, a few moments later, someone began knocking again. This time, my mom shouts at whoever it is that she's going to call the cops, and if anyone tries to come inside, she would shoot them. Again, no response. My mom phoned the police, and around 2 a.m., they finally show up and do a quick search of the outside of our house, while we all waited on the inside. After their search, they tell my mom that they'd found a piece of barbed wire about 4 feet long next to the front door, and they asked if it belonged to us. My mom told them that it wasn't hers and asked why. The police officer told her that it had to belong to whoever was knocking on the door then. He also told her he thinks that they were planning on strangling my mom with that barbed wire when she opened up the door to see who was knocking, and told her she was very smart to not open the door to see who was out there. Otherwise, it could have costed her life. They said they'd patrol the neighborhood until morning and do a thorough investigation once there was daylight outside. That next morning, as they were searching around the house, they found footprints leading to the back of the house and leading up to my bedroom window. They'd also found nicks in the windowsill where they were trying to pry it open and break in, but had failed. Not long after that, we moved out of that house. This happened back when I was in college. During the summers, I lived back home with my parents at their house. I had almost the entire basement to myself, and they wouldn't really go down there much when I was gone. There was a big TV down there, and then my bedroom and a bathroom. It was really nice to have all of that space. I drove home from school after I had finished my finals and packed up my stuff from the college dorm. When I arrived back at my parents' house, they happened to be gone. They told me that they would be back in a few hours and were out for the night. That meant that I would be home alone. I did have my own house key, so when I got back, I was able to get inside. I spent the first bit of time unpacking a bunch of my stuff and putting some of it into storage in the basement. I went down into the basement and I stayed in the main room and was using the TV for a while. It was then that I thought I heard a noise coming from inside of my bedroom. I hadn't been in there yet, and the door was closed. I didn't know what it could be, but I wasn't scared or anything like that. I casually got up and walked over to the door. Then I opened it. When I did, I heard the sound of my closet door closing. It was kind of out of my view, and when I looked over to it, the door was completely shut. Suddenly, I was now a little bit concerned about what this could be. Only a person could close the door like that, and I was home all by myself. I thought about going over and opening the closet door, but decided not to. I turned around and walked out of the room instead. I no longer wanted to be downstairs, and I went up into the living room upstairs. As I was up there, probably 30 minutes went by without anything happening. I was just watching TV and relaxing on the couch. Out of nowhere, I heard the sound of somebody walking up the staircase. I knew that it wasn't my parents because they weren't home yet. I looked over to the stairs. The person was not in my view yet, but I kept looking. Then I saw a man start to come into view, and he was walking up the stairs towards me. This guy looked a little bit older than me, but had a beard and long hair. He looked like he had to be on some kind of drug or something. As he approached me, I quickly got up. I backed away and asked him who he was. The guy didn't say anything. He just kept walking closer. I told him that he needed to get out of here, or I was going to call the police. The guy didn't say anything though and kept getting closer and closer to me. I was backed up as much as I could and would soon reach the wall. He continued to approach me. I then ran to the side and was now in the back corner of the house. The guy kept coming near me. Then he started to charge at me. This guy had to be insane. When he lunged for me, I jumped out of the way. He caught part of my leg and I fell to the ground. The man fell also. I was able to get to my feet before he did, and I ran to the staircase and went down the stairs as quickly as possible. When I made it to the bottom, I opened the door and left the house. The crazy guy did the same with a little bit after me. I went sprinting down the neighborhood street, yelling at the guy to get away from me. He stopped chasing me eventually and kind of wandered off into somebody else's yard. Then I was finally able to compose myself and call 911. When the police got to my street, I didn't know where the guy was anymore. I had walked back to our house and was standing in the front yard. The guy ended up being found about 15 minutes later. I guess he went and hid in somebody's backyard, and they saw him and called the police. The police happened to already be there a few houses away at my place and picked the guy up. I'm really not sure how he got into my parents' house or how long he had been there. I'm guessing he got in shortly after they left. I do know that he was there the entire time that I was, and that really gives me the creeps. I live by myself in an apartment. It's really close to downtown of a big city. There are lots of people that live in the area, but I've never witnessed anything that crazy until recently. A few months ago was when this story took place. It had been another long day of work and I had just gotten home. I worked a long shift and I love my job, but it can be very tiring. After walking home, I got into my apartment building and up to the 4th floor where my place was. I got inside, closed the door, and locked it like I always did, and then headed to take a shower. Put on some comfortable clothes and go to bed. I had made it about 10 feet away from my front door when I heard the knob turning. Somebody was trying to get in. This was strange and something that had never happened before. I stopped in my tracks and then moved over to the door and looked out the peephole into the hallway. Nobody was there. Whoever had tried to enter, I guess, had just left. Maybe it was a mistake or maybe it wasn't. Either way, I was really tired and just wanted to take a shower and go to bed. About 20 minutes later, I was in bed and just browsing on my phone before I fell asleep. During this time, all of my lights in my apartment were out and it was completely silent inside. That's when I heard my doorknob being turned again, but not once this time, multiple times. There was no knock, but I knew whoever had tried to enter before was likely back. I couldn't sleep with the thought of someone trying to enter my apartment. I got up from bed and tiptoed over to the door to look out once again. This time I saw somebody. A man stood there just outside of my front door. I kind of freaked out when I saw him. He looked kind of sketchy, wasn't well dressed but put together. He was just standing there and looking at my door. Then he tried opening it another time. He sort of looked around the hallway and then back to my door. I kept watching and he stood there for maybe another minute. Then he turned to the right and started walking away down the hallway. The hallway led straight down to the stairs and elevator area. I waited to make sure that the guy was leaving, and about 10 seconds after he left my view, I quietly opened my door. I snuck out into the hallway and took a few steps out to make sure that the guy was going to leave. Hopefully that would give me peace of mind and I could go back to bed. At first I saw the man a good distance down the hallway walking away still. He was almost at the end of the hall, but then he stopped and turned around and faced me. He started heading towards me and his walk quickly turned into a sprint. I hurried as quickly as I could to get back inside my apartment and close the door. As soon as I made it inside, I slammed it and locked it. The man reached the door probably a second later and tried opening it again. After he realized it wouldn't open, he pounded on the door a few times. I yelled to the other side asking what the man wanted. He did not answer me but kept standing there. I watched still from the people inside. He tried opening the door again. I yelled that I was calling the police, and then the man finally turned and left. Still, I wasn't convinced that he was actually gone. I waited around for about an hour checking out my door every so often. He didn't return though. Finally, I was able to go back to bed. I haven't seen the man since that night. Looking back, I think he probably followed me home on the street. I might have even let him into my apartment building without knowing. I didn't really pay that good of attention as I walked home. But now, I do.